We'll now move into our agenda for today. Just for information for board members, Member Barreras and Member Reed and Member Price will not be with us today. Let's move into our state legislative update. Vice Chancellor Garcia, and let me just express on behalf of the board, Marlene, thank you for the great job last night with our reception. Well done.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members and Chancellor. You each have copies of the state legislative update, and that's been updated as of Friday. So last week was the last week, the deadline for policy committees to pass bills with a fiscal impact. So it was a very busy week and a lot of activity in the legislature and in the legislative committees. So you have the up-to-date information on the status of various bills, and the matrix provides you, again, a listing of all the bills we monitor, the state legislative update, highlights, major bills that have an impact on the community colleges. And then what I will do today is just give you a few major highlights that distinguish this year in terms of legislative activity. I think one of the factors that distinguishes this legislative year in terms of policy is that the legislature is really grappling with some tough policy issues, in large part driven by the fiscal environment, driven by the demand for community college education, and the genuine desire to help bring more access to students. I think the work of the Board of Governors Student Success Task Force has been very effective in ensuring the legislature that we, in fact, are dealing with those tough issues. I think folks have been receptive to the issue of enrollment priority and understanding that those are the kinds of issues that we're tackling in the Student Success Task Force, and have for now let go of the desire to weigh in on issues such as that. But there are other bills that are going through the process that are gathering a lot of momentum and interest and raising some significant questions for us, those of you who lead the community colleges. So what I'd like to do is just cover a few of those so that you know what seems to be on the minds of folks in the legislature. The first bill I want to highlight is AB 515. This is by Assembly Member Julia Brownlee. And this is a bill that would, for the first time, permit community colleges to provide extension courses for credit and charge the full cost of instruction. Up until now, there have been community service programs offered in the colleges, but you could not get credit. So this would make a significant change because, one, it would provide credit for these classes, and two, it would allow local governing boards to increase the fee levels to cover the entire cost of instruction. This bill has raised a lot, even in the policy committee, the higher ed policy committee, there was a really in-depth discussion about this issue and all the potential ramifications of going this direction. I think right now, Assemblymember Brownlee is very interested in talking with leaders of the community colleges and understand how we might be able to explore these components of the bill and do it in such a way that we could mitigate any unintended consequences. The sponsors of this bill are Santa Monica and College of the Canyons, so community colleges are heavily involved in working on this, and there's quite a lot of opposition, particularly from faculty groups. And then there are a lot of people who are genuinely trying to understand the different dimensions of this issue. But I think that, it's complex is the first issue, and it's something that, we can't go into without giving it complete thought and planning. And some of the issues that have been identified are the fee structure, How would it work? How would it be set? Financial aid. Do these students have access to financial aid? Are there some equity protections embedded in this type of proposal? The other issue is what should be the focus of the content that's provided in this kind of extension program? Should it be a whole program, or should students be allowed, if they're in the subsidized portion of the college, should they be allowed to take a class that's filled up in the public side and take it over at the extension side? And then also governance. Who's going to approve this? Who's going to ensure that, in fact, colleges are equipped to move in this direction? So as you might imagine, there are a lot of questions, probably more questions than answers at this point. And there's been some talk about potentially trying something like this on a pilot basis, that might be a more viable approach to examining this very big and complex issue. So that's a big issue, and I think that a lot of that is in response to the current environment and the tremendous demand we have at our colleges and our limited capacity to respond to that demand. But that'll be an ongoing discussion for the next several months, and I'm sure you all will participate in that one way or another. The next bill is another one of these bills that's in response to a growing concern, and this is how the state is able to handle the large number of adult learners. This is AB 1315 by Assemblymember Furutani. And right now, the bill would establish gateway centers, which basically are sort of a new approach to adult education programs. And as you might know, that adult education programs have been primarily offered through the K-12 system. Well, we have a handful of colleges in the community colleges that offer adult ed. What's happened recently in the budget process is that adult ed programs were once categorical programs, and now they've been put into the flex portion of the budget. So those funds are no longer reserved exclusively for adult education. What we've seen as a result of that change is there's been a drift away from providing adult ed programs. I think there's documented 7% drop in providing adult education within K-12. Some argue that that 7% reflects an absolute elimination of their adult programs. But what you've seen probably in most situations is a reduction, and that's not included in the 7%. And also, we are also experiencing demands and cutbacks in all of our areas of instruction, and so of course that would include adult learners as well. So as a result of that, Assemblymember Furutani has authored this bill, and he's at this point structured it around these gateway centers that presumably would be designed to take adult learners and contextualize their learning experience within a college environment, or at least to give them access to college classes that they can start that are career technical education oriented, so that it would add more relevance to their adult education experience. I think this bill needs a lot of work. The way it's currently structured, it's a mandate, which is a major problem, but I think the author, Assemblymember Furutani, is someone that we can work with in really thinking through this tough issue and reevaluating our role in this arena in relationship to K-12. And I think it's fair to say that community colleges are in no position to absorb the K-12 stepping away from adult education without compensation. So all of those issues are on the table, and I think that it's a key state policy issue to decide what kind of investment it wants to make in this adult learner population, which is a very sizable part of our population in California. So that's another major policy issue that we should be giving some thought to. And one that, at some point, if we have communication with State Board of Ed, it's probably an issue that would lend itself to a healthy policy discussion. Another bill that I want to bring to your attention is AB 160 by Assemblymember Portantino. And this is a bill that has been really popular, including among this board and many in California. And that is concurrent enrollment. What this bill does is, originally, it would have expanded concurrent enrollment significantly by relaxing a lot of the current restrictions. One of the restrictions is that students would no longer have to get approval from their high school principal, that they would basically inform their school that, by the way, I'm taking a concurrent enrollment class at the community college. That, among other provisions, would have been relaxed. We raised some concerns. There's some in the community colleges that were supportive, several community college districts that were supportive of this bill, including permitting local governing boards to allow high school concurrent enrollment students to be a higher priority in enrollment. We were particularly concerned with opening up the enrollment of these students when in fact we're turning away hundreds of thousands of college-age students who don't have any other alternatives. But we're also mindful of not, the concurrent enrollment is a very helpful, valuable resource, but it's a finite resource. And we don't want to send the message that we're not supportive of concurrent enrollment, because it's a very powerful student success strategy, particularly for at-risk students, and there are a lot of programs that really use concurrent enrollment very strategically. We were reluctant to open it up and basically allow anyone to decide whether they want to take an AP class in college or a college class that they can, enjoy while they're doing their high school education. So we've been in a lot of negotiations with the author, with Assemblymember Portantino, and I bring that to you so that you can think about this question in relation to the kinds of budget constraints we have, but that we want to be supportive of this, and that what a lot of the thinking that's come out of the concurrent enrollment discussion is concurrent enrollment is a resource we need to use very carefully and strategically, and it's really effective when you do it with K-12 as a partner. And that was the amendment that the author took, that working with the committee and Assemblymember Julia Brownlee, that when a local community college district is working in a bona fide partnership with the K-12 district, they then would have the ability to relax some of the restrictions, including if they want to provide higher enrollment priority for their local high school students who are participating in a program, for example, they would have that ability to do that. But it would be in an actual program. So there was some relaxation of the policy, but it is in the context of there being some kind of coordinated effort between K-12 and community colleges. The author, though, has still stuck by this, his very strong interest to allow students outside of the partnership to still indicate and just notify the high schools that they're going to be taking concurrent enrollment, as opposed to getting permission. We continue to think that the principal should offer permission. So we're no longer opposing the bill, but we haven't yet come on board unless you have some, feelings about that provision that you think I should reconsider.
Is that the primary objection, Marlene? I mean, that's the reason that our system wouldn't, or our board, or the chancellor's office, would not take a support position.
Correct. Unless, I get feedback and more thinking on this than what we've.
Okay, I'll let the chancellor go first, and then Member McDougall.
I want to clarify something about our situation. I said it yesterday, and I'm willing to say it again. We're in a time when we're having to ration our education. Now, that's a hard thing to say, because 10 or 15 years ago, we were so open door that we rose to every challenge. And it's not that we wouldn't like to do that again today, but the reality is that we do have to ration our education. And so we have to say, we can't say yes to a lot of ideas that people have about what we could do. Vice Chancellor Garcia has already indicated the problems that we have with adult education. I think she explained it rather well, but I'll reiterate something about adult education. Adult education has previously been handled by both the community colleges in some areas and by K through 12. There's generally been sort of a gentleman's agreement. If K through 12, like in Los Angeles, has adult education, community colleges don't have the non-credit education. In Pasadena, where I was, community colleges handle adult education through the non-credit program. So all of a sudden, when we're seeing that adult education is atrophying in K through 12, it's kind of natural for us to want to step forward and say, you know, we do a good job at this. And frankly, if the state of California were to fund us to do that, we would be thrilled to do it. But we know that if we suddenly were to take on all of adult education, that would crowd out our transfer students and our career technical students. And so we have these kind of issues. That's the only issue that I raised about the baccalaureate degree. Should we offer applied baccalaureate degrees? Well, some community colleges throughout the nation are doing this. And there's a way that I would like to say yes to that, because I'm sure we could offer like a bachelor's degree in nursing and do a superb job. But where would the money come from? And that's the only problem we have with concurrent enrollment. We would love to offer, because it's a good policy for the state and it's good for students. But let's say that here we have, and I'm going to just use, here we have a junior in high school who is going to go to Stanford or Berkeley and likes to take a community college course, and we like for them to do it. But finally, we're thinking about those students who show up at our door as first-time students who want to be full-time students, and they get turned away. 140,000 got turned away. And if we have an all-cuts budget this year, we think 400,000 will be turned away. So the legislature, well-intentioned legislators, come to us with these great ideas of what the community college could do. And, you know, we hate to be the one putting the brakes on, but there comes a time when we've got to say, wait a minute, we can't do all of this, because it means that we will crowd out some of those functions in our college which we consider our primary task. And so that's really the problem that we have, and I want you to appreciate it. For instance, in this issue of concurrent enrollment, some wanted us to take on basic skills for high school students. And, well, in the first place, basic skills ought to be taught by the high school. And second is, we don't have enough basic skills classes for the students that we have that enroll. And so here's I want you to catch on, I want you to understand that when the Chancellor's Office begins to suggest a hesitancy about certain things, that hesitancy does not come from our not believing that's a good task, and maybe it's a task we could do very well. Like adult education, as one who was at Pasadena City College, I remember we had a wonderful non-credit program, and due to this day, built a complete building for that program. And we vocationally trained people in commercial sewing and electronic assembly and so forth. It's a great program. But it's sometimes, the legislator gets real excited about something the community college does, but the Department of Finance doesn't get quite as excited about it, because they're saying to us, we're only going to give you so much money. Now, at the very best, we're going to have a 5% cut this year, at the very best. So keep in mind that means we're going to have to cut some of our course offerings at every college. And then suddenly if somebody says, but we want you to take on this new duty, this new responsibility, and we say, well, hold on just a minute. And it sounds like we don't want to accomplish something, but it's like we're saying our plate is already full. You know, when somebody talked to me about our offering the baccalaureate degree, I said, we don't have enough money to do what our primary missions are: career technical education, transfer education, and basic skills. And until the state can give us enough money to do those things, we're going to be hesitant to take on some other roles that if maybe 10 or 15 years ago when the money was flowing pretty freely to community colleges, we'd say, fine, we'd love to do it. But I just want to explain to you why that somebody could say, well, the chancellor's office is against adult debt, or the chancellor's office is against concurrent enrollment. That's not it at all. The chancellor's office is just a little bit fearful of what we can do in a very tight fiscal arrangement. So that's, I just, you can, by the way, you can disagree with me. I'm not, if you think there's something, but remember that when we step up and say, we'll take on that task, we've got to be willing to step up and say, but we'll do a little less of this task. Because, there's just, you get, as I sometimes say, you can't pour 10 gallons of water in a 9-gallon jug. It just won't work. Something overflows. And we've got maybe not even a 9-gallon jug. In the we took an 8% cut 2 years ago, and we're going to take a 5% cut now. Now, if I add those two together, I get 13%. And so our jug is about 87% of what it was 3 years ago in terms of fiscal resources.
Member,
Sermon's over.
Member McDougall.
Yeah, I fully concur with what the Chancellor just said, and would like to offer just a slightly modified perspective on this, and that is that, as the Chancellor stated, I think there's universal support for the intent of the bill. But what is lacking is the financial capability to implement that. But the bill makes easier something that we have done, something that we intend to do in the future if resources become available. So personally, I would see a position of supporting but highly modifying expectations. To me, it improves the infrastructure of our relationship with our high schools, and it enables those colleges that may want to keep that in place to be able to do so at a very moderate level, but do it easier than it can be done right now. So I guess I see a little bit of a half loaf here that I would like to be able to take advantage of, but making it explicit as we go through the process that there is not going to be a lot of activity in this area because of a lack of funding.
Member Baca.
I can't disagree to any extent what the Chancellor just laid out in terms of the issue of not having the money to do the things that we'd like to do, but just can't do it unless we do. But it just struck me, and this is not the focus of the bill, but we've received some data that shows that high school graduates are just not getting to the community colleges because they're the last in line to register. And it does seem that concurrent enrollment could help with that prioritizing of registration as they graduate. But it's just a thought. Again, that's just not to contradict that, we can't do the things that we need to do, but it, might be delivered to the legislature that this is happening, that the high school graduates, they're just not getting access, and unless we get the additional financial support, that's the way it's going to be. And we certainly can't solve that problem by creating another problem. Because concurrent enrollment is a good idea, but I agree. I think at some point in time, we do want to certainly engage in that in a greater capacity, but it's very difficult to do it unless we have the resources yet.
Other board members, I have a couple comments, but I want to give other board members an opportunity. Okay. You all know I am very, very supportive of concurrent enrollment, and I agree with Member McDougall that this bill does make it easier for somewhere in the future when there are resources to do more of this, but let me ask you, Marlene, even if this bill were to pass in its current form, local districts still make decisions in terms of priorities, with the exception of priorities that are mandated by state law, such as veterans and other things. Is that correct? So even if it passed, even if we supported it, it doesn't mandate that there be more concurrent enrollment, correct?
Correct. And currently, a current law, though, prohibits giving concurrent enrollment students higher priority. They have to have low priority. And so this would change that when it would permit them the opportunity to change that when they're in a partnership with a K-12 district. So it doesn't mean that they have to change it. They're permitted. It's permissive.
Right.
But they can't do it right. They can't change the enrollment priority right now. 'Cause that's the law.
I understand. So personally, I'm supportive of that because it is an option, and I think it's important. I'm sympathetic to the notion. However, I think there probably is something to getting a principal's permission to do it. I don't know what the actual effect would be if we were to say any student, any high school student, could just notify that they're taking a class at the community college. I guess I'd need to know more about that, but I'm sympathetic to the chancellor's office not, for that being a significant, reason not to take the step. The question for me is, does that outweigh the opportunity to make it easier for K-12 and community colleges to let this happen in the future? Member Davis Lyman.
Thank you. Is this not similar to the prerequisite policy that we passed, that it was up to local control? The people had that opportunity, but it was to be established locally. Is this similar to this?
Well, the part of the bill that says you can relax your concurrent enrollment requirements if you're in a bona fide, a formal relationship with K-12, that would then give the locals the authority. The principal provision, though, is outside of that. So a student, and here's to answer your question, the potential impact could be, for example, it is highly competitive to get into colleges and universities these days. Students, particularly those who are in the fast track, the college prep track, they know I can go over to the community college and take photography. It's not going to count towards my high school GPA, but it will bump up my college GPA. So that will be a 5-point scale grade, and that gets built into your GPA. So you can go from maybe, if you take 5 concurrent enrollment classes, you can go from maybe a 3.9 GPA to that 4.5 GPA, which is what oftentimes is required nowadays to get into your top universities. Yeah. So it's unclear what the potential behavior will be if students no longer have to get permission, that they can just identify, I want to do this.
Let me just, Chancellor, do you see that particular provision as being a competitive pressure on the locals that you would be opposed to, as you say, in these rationing times?
Well, I don't know that I oppose it. I will tell you that a lot of times these students are, of course, they're very sharp, and sometimes they know a lot about registration. I think, frankly, we have been, I'm probably more deeply concerned, if you really want to know, about still older adults who are taking personal enrichment courses. I think they ought to even be behind concurrent enrollment. I find colleges are moving in that direction, but they're still, they feel the pressure. And I'm not so sure that the Student Success Task Force will be discussing priority registration. And maybe in the next legislative session, there may well be a bill that will deal with priority registration, because sometime I think the local colleges need their hands strengthened on this issue, because they find it a little difficult to stand up to the pressure that's involved. But I think there's a state interest in this whole thing, and now I know that people would disagree with me, but I honestly think, and I'll just be, I know there's a course right now in one college called Ceramics for Seniors. Well, I'm not quite as anxious about keeping ceramics for seniors in our curriculum as I am basic English and basic math for people who want to transfer our career technical education for the person who's out of work. So maybe concurrent enrollment might be a little behind some of these other people, but I would say they perhaps have a need that exceeds some of our personal enrichment courses. And I don't know the solution to this. On one hand, you'll hear colleges saying, well, we don't like for you to tell us what to do. And on the other hand, there's a state interest involved in this, and it's a little bit, and I know there are people who are I wouldn't call them our critics, but at least they look over our curriculum, and they point out to me sometime, as a reporter did once in a conversation. She said, well, I have a couple of friends that are taking aerobics down at your, because it's cheaper than it is at an athletic club. And I didn't know what to say. I couldn't say, well, I think those people ought to be getting a course when our college freshmen can't get a course. That's a little bit tough to argue, So we've got to, this is not an easy situation, and I'm just laying it out in front of the Board of Governors to let you know that we have an issue here, and I have mentioned concurrent enrollment in adult education and so forth, but some way, somehow, I think we, in the day of rationing, we have got to really look at our curriculum and our offerings and say, these are the people that we have to serve first. Let's take a photography class. Photography is something that can be taken as a fine arts, meeting a fine arts requirement, because, photography is something that's not merely snapping a camera. It can be taken as a hobby. Now, which one should you put first in line? If there happens to be 2 or 3 spaces in a photography class, fine to let an adult come in there and, learn camera techniques and all the rest. But I don't believe we ought to let adults come in there and then somebody who's trying to get a fine arts requirement for their associate degree can't get in that class. And that's the real rub that we're talking about here. And we're gonna, and this is one of those issues that we will not have unanimity on. I can guarantee you. So the real, I think what we really have to get down to is what courses should we offer and what should be our priority in registration. That's the issue we're talking about, and this is only one small facet in the discussion of priority registration and course offering.
Member Davis Lyman, you wanted to.
I'd like to give another, an example of a student locally. Isela Nava, who has been in some of our publications as a junior, as a senior in high school. She took after class, during summers, enough courses. I just saw her 2 weeks ago, that she now is a senior, going to be next year a senior at Sac State, that she will complete her college education before the 4 years because she had a semester's worth of community college transferable units. She is the first in her family to go to college. She will be the first in her family to get a degree, and probably with honors. And so it's cost effective in some ways if we look at the total picture for the state of California. She will be out in the workforce. Hopefully there will be jobs for her at that point and in her career. But that's another example of the students, not just the students who are taking AP classes. She got, and while she was at the community college, she got the kind of support she needed so that when she hit the ground at Sac State, she hit it running. And so that's another example of how concurrent enrollment can enhance our communities and the state as well and be cost effective.
Thank you. Vice President Paris and Member McDougal, and I'd like to say one more thing, and then I think we gotta move on a bit.
I just think, obviously, the funding is an issue, and we have to have the funding to continue to provide the services that we provide to our students. Most students that I know, and I still have a lot of family members that are in college right now, and my kids are still in college, and so on. They will not take classes unless it's absolutely necessary. They're not going to take, recreational type classes, most students. If they're going to do classes in conjunction with high school, it's going to be to help them get an edge over graduating sooner and achieving their goals sooner, or being able to get into that four-year university sooner. And so I just think, to the extent, we serve a very diverse population. We have a lot of returning students. We have students that are focused on certificate programs, and we have students that are focused on transferring to four-year university. And I just think, to the extent that we can help those students get enrolled in our college to advance themselves quicker, I just think we ought to be supportive of that. And again, as long as we get the funding to help do that. And going back to the issue that the locals have the opportunity to determine how they participate in partnership, which is the critical piece. Because to me, as long as there's a partnership, that means that more than likely it's set up to be successful, opposed to just randomly having people go and apply to the school. So I just think, as a board, it is something that we ought to consider being supportive of, and again, as long as we have the funding stream with it.
Member McDougal.
Yeah, just very quickly, I think, again, we have to remind ourselves this is not a mandate by any extent. It's an opportunity to change and allow for greater flexibility. I have tremendous confidence in the local district's ability to manage this so that it does not become a conflict, because I concur that continuing students should frankly be the top priority, those going for a degree or certificate, and also feel that in terms of personal enrichment, that in a time of rationing, that has to be, those opportunities are not going to be there to the extent. But I think it does provide an opportunity to strengthen the relationship, and it doesn't have to expand any programs, and I think local districts could manage it, so.
Yeah. I agree. I would tend to be supportive of this with one caveat, and maybe I would, defer to you, Marlene, and the Chancellor. Is this issue of receiving permission and us, quite frankly, not knowing what the impact would be, would that be worthy of a little more study on your part, and then bring it back to us? Because I want to respect you and the Chancellor's feelings here, but I'm sensing on the board anyway a desire to support. Having said that, I know you always have very good, there are very good reasons internally and with our constituents and other partners why they might have some trepidation, so it might behoove us to get a little bit more explanation.
Well, let me also let me just thank you all. This has been a very robust policy discussion, exactly the kind of discussion we should be having on these important issues. And this critical issue, frankly, has taken the form that it has because of the fiscal environment we're in. But I think that we've really made some headway on this. One is, I think the provision that says and emphasizes and reinforces that concurrent enrollment should be done as a partnership between the K-12 and the community college district is a significant improvement in the policy, because it does ensure that students will be guided more effectively towards the example that you gave, Member Davis-Lyman, that students will be participating in a program that helps them expedite their education, or the student who doesn't have access to AP classes at their high school, which, you know, there are students who have to go to the community college. I think it enhances the ability to utilize concurrent enrollment more effectively, and I think that everyone recognizes this is a valuable tool for students and the state. The issue is this one provision: should any student be allowed to just outside of the partnership decide whether they should be taking any concurrent enrollment?
Because that's not a partnership.
And so that is the reason we did not go so far, is to support it. But we have said at the committee, we understand, we absolutely are supportive of this issue. As a matter of fact, we went on record supporting concurrent enrollment for Senator Lowenthal's bill that would permit the Long Beach City College, Long Beach Unified School District, and Cal State Long Beach to enter into a partnership and give concurrent enrollment students a higher priority. We said that's the kind of partnership that is most effective for concurrent enrollment, and we are on the record as supporting that. And we also supported the middle college, high school concurrent enrollment.
Well,
So I think that we're all saying the same thing, and what we can do is come back and explore this parent or the principal permission provision, or, you know, I'm here to do whatever you want me to do.
well, I would, you know, absent a motion to change the recommendation, I would ask that you do come back with that information, because like I said, I certainly lean toward support. I hear other members as well, but I do want to be fully informed about, you know, potential consequences. Any objections to that from the board? Okay, thank you.
I have a couple more issues I want to mention. We don't have to get into discussion, but I want to bring it to your attention because one of them is AB 684 by Assembly Member Block. And this is a bill that would permit local community college governing boards to switch from at-large to single district elections. And that the bill specifies a process, but before they can make that switch, they would have to come to the Board of Governors to get approval. So this is an issue that it seems to be straightforward. I believe that this kind of framework exists for K-12 boards of governor or local boards, and the Community College League has been very supportive of this and has asked us to be supportive, and it seems to make some sense. And I'm wondering if anyone from the league is here. They were going to talk about it. I don't have a lot of the specifics of what that process would look like at this point coming before you, but what I promise I'll do is spend more time trying to understand that and come back to you next meeting and talk about what this might be in terms of your particular role on this matter.
Okay.
So with that, I'm happy to answer questions, or we can now switch to our federal relations update, and we have a special guest here today.
Let me, first, any other comments or questions from board members? No. I do want to, we have a couple of members of the audience who would like to comment on the state update, so I'd like to give them their opportunity before we move to our federal update.
Jonathan Lightman from Faculty Association of California Community Colleges.
Thank you, President Himmelstein, Chancellor Scott, and members, and also thank Vice Chancellor Marlene Garcia for the tremendous job that she's doing. I'm here to discuss Assembly Bill 515 with you, the bill that would permit extension courses in the community colleges. Carl Friedlander, who represents the California Federation of Teachers, before he left, asked me if I could also speak on his behalf, as did Josh Golka, who represents the California School Employees Association. All of us are in strong opposition to this bill, and it has not come easily. There have been debates up and down the state. It may seem a little bit counterintuitive to you insofar as if we were to offer these credit extension courses, this would represent jobs. At the same time, the overwhelming sentiment from the classified, the faculty, and I've spoken to Alex Pater, even the students, is that what this does is it puts us in the direction of creating a two-tier system for our colleges. The supporters' argument suggests that this keeps faith with the community. We actually believe that this causes a lot of confusion in the community. But more importantly, what we see is that students of means who will be able to pay the higher fees will be able to enroll in these courses, whereas students without means who will not be eligible for BOG grants for these courses because they're not state-supported courses will not be able to enroll. And so you may end up with a population that is both economically advantaged and maybe educationally advantaged. And, you know, as our president, John McDowell, said, you know, I can write the evaluation for you. It worked brilliantly. And at that point, we will see policymakers say, well, the real cost of these courses is $200, and that's what we should be charging for all of our courses. We also have a strong concern in terms of the language, the protection language against non-supplantation. We don't believe that the language in the bill actually has any teeth to it. But more importantly, what we see happening is the possibility for districts to retain their traditional lecture courses in the state-supported side and move their career technical education courses, which are more expensive, over to the extension courses. And that would create an even greater price for these courses. Now, what we have recommended to the author is the following. We've said, look, we understand that this bill is born out of frustration. As Chancellor Scott mentioned, that we have reduced our system, our capacity of our system. We took it from 2.9 to 2.7 million, and we're reducing it again. At the same time, what we believe in terms of a policy response is that we should have a genuine conversation both within the system as well as within the legislature to see if we can come up with some consensus proposals in terms of how to address this excess capacity. This bill, unfortunately, is extremely divisive, and we don't believe that is moving us in a positive direction for our system. Thank you.
Thank you.
When everyone's through speaking.
Okay. Jane Patton from the Academic Senate.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. I'll first piggyback on what Jonathan Lightman just said. The Academic Senate also had a very extensive debate about AB 515, and the Academic Senate also opposes the bill on a whole series of concerns. But what I really came to talk to you about is the concurrent enrollment topic. I've read quite a bit about concurrent enrollment, and I became very passionately supportive of it when I read the literature and recognized what it will do, particularly for underrepresented students, students who don't see themselves as college students and who maybe are not doing great in high school, suddenly have the opportunity to be connected to a community college, end up finishing high school, end up going to community college, end up getting a better career. And I will say that I appreciated the end of your conversation where you began to say, maybe we need to talk about this a little bit more and look into it some more. And I think President Himmelstein suggested a little more dialogue, and I think that's absolutely right. The Academic Senate has a support position of the notion of concurrent enrollment, and we've had it for several years. And we have an opposed position on doing it at this time because of the climate. For all the reasons that the Chancellor laid out, there are only a certain number of seats in our classes. And if we are turning away thousands and thousands of college students, we cannot also be educating this additional population today. I am passionately supportive, as is the Academic Senate, of concurrent enrollment, and we do not think today is the right time to do it. However, I'm on the Student Success Task Group, And the Chancellor's correct. This is a topic, and Peter McDougall and Manuel Baca can agree that this is something that we need to discuss further. And if we look at the whole package, including concurrent enrollment, including students who want community service or people in the community who want activity courses or whatever, I think we can come up with a recommendation that really looks at the entire package. So I would urge you not to support AB 160 at this time, and instead do a lot more focused study and allow the task group on student success to continue its work as well. Thank you.
Leslie Smith, Associate Vice Chancellor, Government Relations, City College of San Francisco.
Morning. I'm here to speak on AB 515. San Francisco has a policy against fee increases, and quite frankly, going for state taxpayers to a potential fee of $200 per unit, which is the same as what international students and out-of-state students pay, is quite a sticker shock for us. We just had a conversation about enrollment priorities in this time of tough budgeting. Do we really want to prioritize the students who can self-fund at $200 a unit? I mean, it seems to me that that's exactly the opposite student that we're trying to outreach to. When we've had significant fee increases, I mean, we're worried about $36 a unit of who's going to get locked out. The $200 unit is certainly going to cater to a population that is not normally our first choice students. Second, if you just think about the type, how would you implement this? I mean, is there a ticker on your web-based enrollment system that when you get to your cap, all of a sudden, instead of paying $36, you go to $200 because you're in the $200 category because there's no longer funding for the college? Does that mean when you walk down a hallway and you see an empty seat and you're a student looking for an English 1A class, that you paid $36 a unit and you get to go into the $200 a unit class because there's a seat? Or does that mean that you can only stay in the $36 a unit class? Or does the $200 a unit student get to sit next to you? I mean, international students and out-of-state students sit right next to the regular students, take the regular classes. All of the courses are on the schedule, and they're fully integrated into our program. And the reason they pay those higher fees is because they don't pay California taxes. Our programs are paid for by California taxpayers. Our buildings are built by California taxpayers. It's kind of a little confusing exactly how this would work, who it would let in. And, you know, I've heard some stuff about summer school, but that's exactly where the Pell Grant is being cut off by the Obama administration, so that you wouldn't have financial aid in the summer. So it's a little confusing to us exactly why we would be doing this, especially in this tough time of enrollment priorities, when we have our facilities are full, really, of students who tend to come from the lower incomes. And, you know, in San Francisco, about 50% of our students are getting financial aid. So it just doesn't seem like the right thing to do at this time.
Thank you. Alex Pater, President of the Student Senate.
Thank you, President Hammelstein, Chancellor Scott, and members of the board. The Student Senate is in opposition of AB 515. We have a standing position that we oppose all fee increases. We also believe that this would move us away from the 1960 Higher Education Master Plan, which guarantees access to an affordable higher education for all. We also believe that it would take pressure off of the system as far as making other reforms. This would simply be putting all the pressure on the students, putting it on the back of the students where the rest of the system can do business as usual. We also believe that financial aid would be limited for these classes and non-existent during summer. And even if financial aid was available in the form of Cal Grants, it would take money away from an already a pool of money that already has a lot of pressure on it that would make it harder for students that are already receiving those Cal Grants at the lower rate. It would take that money away because these programs simply cost more. So we would urge you to take a position of opposition, and thank you very much for your time.
Member Davis Lyman, you wanted to
No,
comment quickly, or?
I actually saw Bonnie Slauson arrive from the league, and I was wondering if she was going to speak to that one bill, the block.
She can. She's available to do that, yes, if you...
Mr. Chair and rest of Board of Governors members, I'm Bonnie Slauson, representing the Community College League. I do know that you had on your agenda for discussion today by Vice Chancellor Marlene Garcia, AB 684 by Marty Block. This legislation is sponsored by the League, is to establish an optional process for our community college districts to have a process similar to K through 12, in which K through 12 can go to the State Board of Education for a waiver to the requirement that election be held to determine your election methodology. Since that law for K through 12 was passed back years ago, the community colleges became a separate system. So this bill would clarify that the community colleges would have a similar process through their respective Board of Governors as K through 12. And one of the reasons for the urgency for this measure is that since the last census period was completed, the California Voting Rights Act passed back in the late 90s. That law requires districts that have their elections at large to re-examine that process to determine if a particular group of people or populations are disadvantaged from being able to elect representatives from their area. So basically, those colleges will have to re-examine their processes if they are at large elections. There's different means for community colleges to hold elections. Some of them are at large, some of them are by trustee areas. This process, optional process, would save community college districts hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars to hold an election to determine if they should go to at trustee area elections, which they most probably will have to underneath the California Voting Rights Act. There's also situations where it could help them save legal challenges from various groups to have this process, because if they do hold an election to determine their elections and that election does fail, they could be sued under the California Voter Rights Act. So we're urging your support of this measure. It is comparable to what K through 12 has under the State Board of Education. And again, that law was established at the time when community colleges were part of the K through 12 system, when it was a K through 14 system. So this would clarify that our community colleges would have the same process to come before you, lay out their various arguments for the necessity to have their elections by areas to comply with the California Voter Rights Act that was passed, I think, back in 1997.
Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Member Malamud.
How many of these districts are there, do you think?
Off the top of my head, it's there, like I said, there's various different means. Many trustee elections are held by areas. Some are at large. Some are at large, but you have to reside in a particular area. So I, off the top of my head, I can't respond right now, but I do have a chart that I can go back and get that information for you. It's probably a mixture of different types of districts. I wouldn't say it's all 72 districts. It's not. It's definitely not that.
Well, my concern is when you say they have to come before our board.
No, they wouldn't have to. It's an option.
Okay.
So they could go before the voters and ask the voters whether the voters want to determine that they go to trustee areas. Mm-hmm. The problem is if the voters turn that down, various legal groups are queued up to sue them, which would be millions of dollars. And the law basically states that the districts would have to pay the legal fees and charges for the plaintiffs.
So you're saying they would come to our board if it failed?
No, it may be an optional process that they come to you without even holding elections. So therefore, they would save money not holding an election as well. Okay. Because holding an election is very costly for counties and for community college districts.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to allow one more comment from the Chancellor.
All right, quickly, why does this happen?
Pardon?
I know, I'm not asking this question, I'm just making a comment. Here's what happens. In at-large elections, sometime you end up with, say, an ethnic group completely unrepresented. maybe that ethnic group represents 45% of the district. But when you have an at-large election, none of that ethnic group gets elected at large, whereas if you had it by areas, there would be a greater diversity. Now, there's a lot of arguments about whether at large or area, and I've served in 3 districts, 2 of which elected by areas, and 1 of which elected at large, but they had to live in certain areas.
Right.
But I'm just saying, that's the basis of all of this. And there was a suit, if I remember, in Watsonville, California, in which the Latino population had never had a member of the school board, and yet the Latino population had over 50% of the population of the district. And so there was a feeling that they were not, and the public school population was over 50% Latino. So there was a strong feeling that an at-large does not give a proper opportunity for certain groups. You could think of it in terms of economics or ethnicity or anything. So that's what this is all about. And I think what the Community College League is trying to do is to give the districts an out where they don't have to go and hold an election, but they could come to us. And evidently, if they come to us asking for that and we approve it, they don't have to go for an election. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. That is
Okay,
correct.
well,
And
that's
there
what
have-
this bill is all about, and my prediction is that slowly, most districts will move to area elections.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to take a 10-minute break and then come back with our federal update.